TEKS Analysis by Natalie Vasquez. These TEKS are for second grade and they involve reading and writing. There are 5 TEKS strands. These involve reading, writing, oral and written convention, research, and listening and speaking. There is also figure 19. Let's start with the first one, reading. Strand 1 is all about reading and the reading process. Students will be able to learn a variety of literacy. This involves comprehension, fluent reading, and vocabulary knowledge. Strand 2 is writing. Students learn about writing and the process. Students will be able to compose an assortment of writing by learning different genres and know the concept of draft and final copy. Next is Strand 3, oral and written conventions. Strand 3 discusses the language part of reading and writing. Students will be able to understand different parts of speech as well as learn how to handwrite and spell correctly. Strand 4, research. Research is a planned process. Students will be able to gather information and create questions to find specific information. Students will use their listening, speaking, and presenting skills while doing research. Last is Strand 5, listening and speaking. Listening and speaking will use previous strands to comprehend what is needed in order to complete a task. Students will be able to attentively pay attention to an oral speaker and comprehend what the speaker is saying, and vice versa. Students will speak clear and to the point while speaking. Students will also be able to develop teamwork with classmates and appropriately follow tasks. Then there's figure 19. Figure 19 is meant for students to understand and comprehend what is going on during reading. They are to focus on the task at hand and ask questions. Making inferencing, making connections, and applying knowledge to their schema is very important. There are 5 standards that I chose that were most important. It's TEKS 2.5, TEKS 2.9, TEKS 2.14, TEKS 2.18, and TEKS 2.22. We'll start with TEKS 2.5. This is the reading and vocabulary development. Students will be able to understand new and unfamiliar vocabulary words. Students will recognize how to correctly use vocabulary words and identify multiple meaning words. TEKS 2.9. This is reading comprehension of literary text and fiction. Students will learn how to make inferences, describe main characters, and draw conclusions. They will also express the similarities and differences of plots and settings in works of fiction. TEKS 2.14. This is reading comprehension of informational text and expository. Students will be able to understand how to work with informal and expository text, such as becoming familiar with the text features and identifying main ideas. They will also determine a sequence of events and locate facts within the text. Next is TEKS 2.18, writing and literary text. Students are intended to learn how to write literary stories that involve writing a story in a sequence about a real or imaginative people, events, and ideas. This can also involve creating poems that create sensory details. Next is TEKS 2.22, oral and written conventions. It also involves handwriting, capitalization, and punctuation. Students will be able to gain knowledge of how to handwrite legibly with appropriate punctuations, such as capitalization correctly, ending punctuation, proper nouns, and many more. There are 2 student expectations that I thought were the most difficult to teach. This is TEKS 2.23b and TEKS 2.10. We'll start with TEKS 2.23b. This is oral and written conventions and spelling. Students are expected to spell words with common orthographic patterns and rules. Students at this age have a difficult time correctly spelling words that they do not know. Students also tend to ask how something is spelled rather than trying to figure it out on their own. The thing that is most difficult to teach is the into-depth patterns and rules, such as long vowels and vowel digraphs. Then there's TEKS 2.10. This is reading comprehension of literary text and literary nonfiction. Students have a hard time determining what is fiction and nonfiction when picking specific books. Students will continuously ask teachers if the book they picked is fiction or nonfiction, even when they are taught the differences. It is difficult because students have a hard time distinguishing for themselves what is fiction and what is nonfiction. What are the differences between readiness standards and supporting standards? What is highlighted in green is considered a readiness standard. These are standards that are a priority to teach in the classroom and need to be taught by the end of the year. These standards are what will create success for students in second grade, and it prepares them for third. What is highlighted in yellow is supporting standards. These are standards that are to be introduced and reinforced, but are not as much of a main concern as readiness standards. These standards are to help and support the readiness standards by teaching more narrow and into-depth standards in a way so students can have a better understanding of what is being taught. What are the differences between tested and untested standards? Things that are taught in the readiness standards are the ones that will be tested for teachers, so they make these the priority in order for students to continue on to the next grade. Things that are not readiness or supporting standards are the things that are not tested at the end of the year, and they do not need to know them in order to move on to the next grade. The consequences? Not teaching untested standards are that students will only learn how to pass rather than knowing the more into-depth and still helpful content of standards. Students will not teach the untested standards because they focus more on what they need in order to pass the students. Teachers tend to put the untested standards aside or never mention them. Thank you.